Hello, in this video I'm going to start a series of uh, class deep dives. First I'm going to start off with the Dragonknight in this series because this is the class that just recently got a work over, and we are going into update 50 and they're going to implement some class mastery, so I thought it would be a good idea to do a deep dive on the classes to kind of go over what each skill line essentially provides your build, as well as what you can look at for filling in gaps on your build that you're working on for subclassing, if that's something that you're going to do. Or if you're just going to remain a pure blood Dragon Knight, then what do you get for that with these upcoming class masteries? So let's get into it. I'm going to go over all of that stuff in this video. As always, I'm going to provide chapters in this video in case it gets a little lengthy for your preferences, then you can always jump ahead. So just a warning and a heads up, this is probably going to be a little bit of a lengthy video. However, as always, you can always see the length of the video when you click on the tile. It's in the bottom right corner of every YouTube video you watch. So I bring that up to say because I've had some people complain about some of the lengths of my videos, which is kind of odd for me. I don't understand not knowing how long a video is going to be when you click on it. So just wanted to bring that up in ahead of time and be real clear about that. I'm trying to include as much information as I can, and I'm also including the chapters in there so that you can jump around to whichever section you'd like to hear. So there's that benefit there. So let's get into it. This is a complete analysis of the skill lines, the damage types, pure class versus subclassing, and what champion points you should look at. Also, what type of builds you're working with based on what you're sitting on, like a solo build, healer build, DPS build, tank build, what you should look at using from this kit, depending on your circumstance. And if you stay with a pure class build, then you'll see what this all entails. So the Dragon Knight has 3 skill lines with the distinct identity and role of basically being a flame class, flame damage class, or flame influenced, I should say. The DPS skill line is essentially the Ardent Flame skill line, focused on offensive fire damage and damage over time, and as the output. The Draconic Power skill line is essentially the tanking skill line, although I would argue that there's a little bit of a kind of a muddied water situation with how the Earthen Heart and the Draconic Power our skill lines are still kind of set up, um, with the Major Resolve skill being in Earthen Heart now. It's a little bit of a either or situation, but it's mostly a defensive skill line with the abilities using crowd control and survivability. There is a damage skill in there as well, but we're going to go over each skill line in a deep dive, so we'll get there. Earthen Heart is primarily a healer skill line. However, it's historically been used heavily on tank builds because of the significant benefits that it provides for that role, with resources and uh, survivability and whatnot. They have reworked that to include some more damaging elements to it, so we'll get to that as well. So essentially, the Dragon Knight is as I said before, is a flame damage skill line. So when you're looking at gear sets, you're looking at what type of status effects it is, what type of damage you're going to be doing. You're going to be doing damage over time, flame damage over time, and the status effect that you're predominantly going to be proccing with this class is the flame burning status effect. And so when you're looking at trying to buff your damage on a Dragon Knight build or a Dragon Knight skill line, you're going to look at stuff that buffs flame damage or damage over time, that kind of thing. We'll get into that a little bit deeper here, but the Dragon Knight's passive toolkit enhances the probability of damaging of burning. So, and also this means the DK's identity directly feeds back into an amplifying dot dominant nature. So it's not simply a dot class by coincidence. It's symmetrically designed around, or I should say systematically designed around flame damage and burning, and every layer of the toolkit reinforces that identity. So the profile, I did a parse on the full bore dragon or full blooded Dragonknight to identify specifically what type of damage lives on the entire toolkit. I used skills from all three of the skill lines, Ardent Flame, as well as Draconic Power and Earthen Heart, to determine what type of damage lives on the toolkit. And as you can see from this percentage breakdown, the direct damage only hit at about 38%, and then the damage over time was at 62. And then it is predominantly a single target class, as you can see. I did not use any gear sets that would affect. It did not. The gear sets that I used did not do damage themselves. Put it that way. I wanted to really test what the toolkit of the Dragonknight did. So this is what I ended up with. And I measured this using the Battle Scrolls add-on. So this is not something that I'm just guessing at. I had a detailed parse, and I used the Battle Scrolls add-on to get this number here. And this was on a 6 million dummy parse all by itself. So this is a true measurement of what the entire Dragonknight kit provides. So looking at the different champion points that you can slot for offensive purposes, knowing what type of damage that you're leaning into. In most cases, you want to use either Deadly Aim or Biting Aura, because in most cases, you're going to lean one way or the other, just like it shows here. You look at the single target versus the area of effect. There's a clear difference here. So you're just going to want to slot the single target, which is Deadly Aim. These are either or in most cases. If you have a 50-50 build, then you could possibly slot both of these. Depends on what type of room you need for your slottables. But I would say probably in most builds, you're going to see a differentiation here, and it'll tell you which case to lean. Now, I will say I slotted all four of these on the build so that I could get a clear representation of what damage type was present in the kit. And so the next category is direct damage versus damage over time. And this is really no surprise. The Dragonknight really does have a massive amount of damage over time on it. And so you're going to want to lean into Thaumaturge and maybe not use Master at Arms as much. Now, the one caveat I will bring up here is if you are going to do a Dragonknight Blowtorch build where you're predominantly leaning into that uh, flamethrower type of mechanic on a build, this may be the avenue that you want to use. I did not test that kind of a build in that, so this is just basically an analysis of the toolkit overall. And so the one caveat I will say is if you're on a blowtorch build, this right here might be the one that you need depending on your situations. But I would always recommend do a parse and use the Battle Scrolls add-on to determine what type of damage you have on your build. That's going to tell you exactly what you need to put on your slottables. So now we're going to analyze the Ardent Flame DPS skill line. This is the offensive powerhouse of the Dragonknight. Every active skill in this line deals flame damage, and the passive toolkit is built around amplifying burning procs and sustaining resources through combat. This skill line defines the DK as a dot and fire damage specialist. And so we're going to analyze the first skill, which is Lava Whip. Now, I will say these tooltips may look different from what you have live in the game. I have implemented some of the notes that they are doing in update 50, and they have changed some of the things that may look like they do in the game. So just keep that in mind. I have implemented some of that. For example, the damage boost that Flame Lash used to have, or it has currently in update 49. They're taking that away from just having it here, and they're adding it into the pure class mastery system. And so it's not deleted from the Dragonknight, but you have to remain a pure blood Dragonknight in order to obtain the boost that the Flame Lash provides. But just as an analysis of these two morphs here, I would say probably in most cases the Molten Whip is going to be the morph of choice because it splits the resource cost from being just magicka to also costing stamina as well. That's not notated here, but um, it's notated here, but it doesn't show it here. That was an oversight of mine. But the Molten Whip is recommended for most builds because of the split in sustain issues. Flame Lash, this morph here, could be optimal for pure Dragonknight Magicka builds because it adds some healing into your toolkit as well. But just keep in mind, if you are running the Pale Order Ring, you're probably going to want to lean into a more damaging style of play so that the Ring of the Pale Order heals you for more of the damage that you're doing. If you're going to run something like this that heals you, then you may need to run something other than the Pale Order Ring. Just something to review and analyze. Keep that in mind. The more damage you do while you're running the Pale Order Ring, makes it easier to operate that. So just keep that in mind. Next up is Searing Strike. This is essentially serves as the spammable of the Ardent Flame skill line. Why do I say that that's the spammable? Because you get stacks of uh, the Seething Fury here for your whip when you do direct damage or when you activate a different, that's the key here, a different Dragonknight skill. If you are spamming Molten Whip, you're not activating a different Dragonknight skill and you're not getting stacks of Fury up. So you're never going to increase your damage whip if you're doing that. You need to hit the Searing Strike 3 times and then hit your whip. This also synergizes with the passive Traumatic Burns. We'll get to that passive here in a minute. But there are two clear choices here, a Magicka morph and a Stamina morph. Depends on what type of build you're running as to what you need to run there. The Magicka Burning Embers morph has healing involved in it, whereas the Searing Claw has a damage over time that lasts longer than the 10 seconds here. This lasts longer. So if you're on a Stamina morph, you're likely going to need to pick the Searing Claw. If you're on a Magicka morph and you want to run the Searing Claw, you may need to make sure that your uh, resources are in place to be able to sustain a Stamina spammable. So kind of difficult to do that unless you really build properly for that. So keep that in mind. Core of Flame is the base skill for the next one. In most PvE builds, this is not optimal to slot for DPS. The one caveat is if you're specifically assigned to interrupt something, then the Soul of Flame morph could be used in that situation. However, there are more optimal things to use, like Crushing Shock from the Destruction Staff, because that has a lot better range. The range on this uh, skill is only 8 meters, as you can see here. So you have to be fairly close to what you're needing to interrupt. Whereas with Crushing Shock, you can pretty much hit it across the room. The one caveat is Crushing Shock is single target, and this is AoE. So if you need to interrupt a lot of different things, then Soul of Flame could be really helpful. Um, but that just goes to say, and then the Heart of Flame is essentially a healing uh, morph, essentially. Uh, Hearthfire is a ground AoE. There are two purposes for this, essentially. neither morph is really optimal for a DPS. This is more of a support skill. Um, the Firekeeper morph will provide minor fortitude and minor heroism. And then the Hearth and Home, you gain major protection while you stand inside of it, and then enemies inside of it have their movement speed reduced. So this is also a ground heal. So it depends on what you're doing. The Firekeeper morph is probably more of a healer skill or whatnot. If you're going to be using the Ardent Flame on a pure Dragon Knight and you want to provide minor heroism to your group, then that could be an avenue for that. The last skill in Inferno, I should say regular skill in Inferno, or excuse me, Ardent Flame, is the Inferno skill. Again, these have two distinct purposes. The Cauterize skill is a healing morph, and then the Incinerate is a damaging morph. Both of these morphs will give you a very vital buff on your build, the Major Prophecy and Savagery. All you have to do is slot this on either bar, and you will get the Major and Prophecy and Savagery buff 100% of the time. I recommend putting this on your back bar because it lasts for quite a long time. You get 15 seconds on there. So it's easy to run this on your back bar and you still get the Major Prophecy and Savagery buff. But I would recommend on a DPS build you use the Incinerate morph. Gets the flame damage out there to hit, and then you have a 15% chance to apply burning. So in most cases, the Incinerate morph is the one to go for. The Pale Order Ring converts damage dealt into healing, so Cauterize is a little bit unnecessary if you're on a solo build because the Pale Order Ring is going to heal for what this does anyway. So keep that in mind. This could probably be more of if you're on a pure Dragon Knight healer. I know that's a little rare, but this might be the morph you want to do if you're doing that because it does heal you or up to 6 allies. So this could be a nice AoE heal that shoots out and heals everybody if you're on a pure Dragon Knight healer. Last is the Dragon Knight Standard. This is epic for support now. This has granted a massive amount of damage for your group. Allies that stand inside of the ring get 300 weapon and spell damage and reduce damage taken of 10%. That is a unique line there. There's not a named buff in here like major protection or anything. This just says reducing damage taken by 10%. Then you gain an addition. The person who casts it gains an additional 15% damage done and reduction of damage taken and 300 weapon and spell damage while you stand inside the banner. So this is a massive, absolutely massive ultimate to use in group for support. All absolutely massive. The other morph shifting standard, I would say probably not recommended for PvE because Major Defile is not an effective debuff for PvE. Monsters don't heal themselves, and for the most part, I'll say that again, for the most part, they don't have shields. So reducing healing received and shield strength here does absolutely nothing in PvE. If a monster does happen to heal themselves, it's likely part of a mechanic. Unless you're dealing with like a realm shaper that's healing something, that's about the only thing that I can think of off the top of my head where it might be affected. But do you really want to waste an ultimate morph on that very narrow category? I would recommend you stick with Standard of Might. Very, very powerful morph for group environment as well as solo for that matter, because of the damage mitigation and the damage increase that you're going to receive. So the passives that are involved in the Ardent Flame, you have the Combustion passive. This used to have poison elements involved into it. They've stripped the poison damage completely out of the Dragonknight toolkit, and now you basically are only going to be applying burning on this. So when you apply burning to an enemy, you are going to restore magicka and stamina, and this can happen every second. Traumatic burns, this is the passive that I was talking about regarding the spammable, dealing direct damage with an Ardent Flame ability. The Searing Strikes causes your target to take 5% increased flame damage and reduction in movement speed. So if you're hitting your spammable at least once every 5 seconds, you're going to make them take 5% increased flame damage. So if you're familiar with the history of, for example, the Burning Embers, or excuse me, not the Burning Embers, the Engulfing Flames skill used to have a 6% increased damage taken buff on it. They've sort of moved that here to Traumatic Burn, and so now it's tied to doing direct damage, and it has to be an Ardent Flame skill. So the other thing that will proc this is the Incinerate skill right here. This does direct damage. So every time you do direct damage, when this pops off every 5 seconds, look at the timing of that. This right here, if you run this skill, this right here will keep your passive of traumatic burns up all by itself. So keep that in mind. Okay, next up, fan the flames. Increase the chance of burning by 50% and its damage done by 25%. These values are inflated by the number of Dragonknight abilities slotted. So this is kind of the biggest problem with the Ardent Flame skill line. In order to really get some power boosted out of it, you really have to stack a lot of stuff on your bar in order to boost this up and get some serious damage on it. Really fine and okay for if you're going to be a pure blood Dragonknight, but if you're looking to subclass with the Ardent Flame skill line, this really hurts it because that dictates that you have to just take up a lot of real estate with these skills, and then you're going to have to go with something that maybe doesn't require as much real estate to get some benefit from. So just keep that in mind if you're looking to use this in a subclassing situation. This right here is really you got to focus on this part. And then the last part, increase your healing taken by 8%. Really good if you're going to be a tank on a pure class Dragonknight, but probably a little bit rare in most cases. But this is a really good solo passive, help you keep healed up. Also, this will help counteract if you group up with people with the Ring of the Pale Order on. This will kind of counteract that reduction that you get from that. So this accounts for 2 people that you group with, just increasing that right there alone. So this could be a good solo skill line to use on a solo build. Depends on what you're building on. Probably more of a magicka skill line, I would say. And that is one thing that I wanted to bring up is there is a lot of magicka costing skills in this toolkit. So you really have to pay attention to having a proper magicka sustain on your build. If you don't do that, you could be in some serious trouble in terms of being able to cast skills and all of that. So keep that in mind. Anyway, we're going to move on to Draconic Power. This is essentially the tanking skill line of the class, and it's the defensive backbone. Most of the stuff that's in this skill line, for the most part, is tanking oriented or support line. It does have some some damaging skills. The ultimate, in my opinion, probably should be switched out to be the Ardent Flame skill line's ultimate because it's essentially a damage oriented ultimate. Doesn't really make sense to be on a tank skill line, in my opinion. I honestly think that all 3 of the ultimates should be moved around. Maybe have the Dragonknight standard be on the Earthen Heart and the Magma Shell be on Draconic Power. That would kind of make Draconic Power a little bit more desirable for tanking. Um, In my opinion, Draconic power is still a little bit behind Earthen Heart for the most part. Not as much as it used to, but it's still not quite there. But the two morphs here for Dragonknight Leap are Ferocious Leap and Take Flight. If you're on a DPS build and you are using the Draconic power skill line, the Take Flight morph is the clear winner here. The Ferocious Leap gives you a damage shield. This is more of a PvP situation, and it scales off your max health. So whenever you see this right here, scales off your max health, that's a tank morph. That's a big damage shield there, but in my opinion, this is not worth having over Magma Shell. Magma Shell wins out based on the fact that it makes you virtually unkillable while it's up, whereas this is just a damage shield. If this gets ripped through, that's the only benefit you had from this. There's no other component here other than the flame damage that it's doing. And then it does knock back monsters, but if you're dealing with a boss or an elite ad, they're immune to knockback anyway. So there are a lot of things here to consider. But if you're going to use a full-blooded Dragonknight and you're a DPS, the Take Flight is probably the choice that you want to make there. This is also a really powerful ultimate to use if you are on the Blowtorch Dragonknight build. This can really stack well with that because of the increased damage done for 15 seconds that you get. This effect doubles against monsters, so you get a 20% damage done, and the ultimate itself is really cheap. It only costs 125 ultimate to cast, and it does flame damage. So it is a pretty strong ultimate for using when you're on the blowtorch build, is what I'll call it. So next up is essentially either a blowtorch skill or just the standard old school dragon cone. This used to be just like the poisonous breath. They've changed it to be flame damage instead of poison. It still applies major breach in an AoE in a cone of 10 meters, but it applies burning status now instead of the poison because it's doing flame damage. That was the key change to this morph here in update 48. Or maybe it was update 49. Sorry about that. But Engulfing Dragonfire is the blowtorch morph. If you're going to use this morph, you pretty much want to build around this skill right here. Another thing I will say is you probably do not want to try this on a stamina build. Very, very difficult to sustain this on a stamina build. So keep that in mind. So while Take Flight active, you get maximum damage from this. It doesn't have to increase in ticks like this to a maximum of 50%. While you get your Take Flight up, this really synergizes with Take Flight. So if you're on a Magicka DPS Dragonknight that's using Draconic power, this is the morph you want to use with Take Flight, and you want to focus on getting Take Flight up and popping that off as quickly as you can to really boost this flame damage up. And that is considered direct damage. So that's the caveat there of what I said earlier. If you're going to use a blowtorch build, that might change the situation of your build from being predominantly damage over time to now it's direct damage. So that's a really important thing that you need to focus on. I would highly, highly reiterate and recommend whatever build you are working on, do a parse with the Battle Scrolls add-on. I will link the description in the description, the video that I did on that. It really tells you what exactly your exact build is doing. Don't put a guess on it. Absolutely confirm it. This will easily help you in figuring out how to build, what types of gear sets you're running, all of that. Make sure you know what type of damage you're doing on your build. Really, really going to help. So the next skill is Dark Talons. There are two morphs for this. Essentially, this is a really clear way to look at it. The Burning Talons is a DPS skill. The Choking Talons is a tank skill. The reason why I say that, this one immobilizes enemies and applies the minor maim debuff. This one does flame damage and is a stronger damaging skill. So that's what you want to pick there, depending on what type of a build. If you're a tank, you want to do Choking Talons. If you're on a DPS build, you want Burning Talons. So next up, Dragon Blood. This is really mostly a tank skill and healer skill if you're on a Dragon Knight healer. The main difference is Dragon Blood of the Green Dragon is basically a selfish heal that gives you minor vitality, major fortitude, major endurance, and a heal over time. The Blood of the Elder Dragon, Blood of the Elder Dragon heals your group members, and it also gives them major fortitude and minor courage. This is unique now. Arcanist used to be the only one that had minor courage. Now the Dragon Knight has minor heroism and minor courage in their kit. So keep that in mind. You could increase your group's damage if you're on a pure blood Dragon Knight healer, or perhaps you're on a tank that's running this and you want to help your group out. This is the one you want to pick. So just a quick caveat here, Dragon Blood serves as the in-class burst heal and is primarily used on tanks, as I said. If you're running with the Ring of the Pale Order, you're probably not going to use this because damage usually heals you up. But that minor courage buff is helpful. You just have to be within 10 meters to be able to apply that buff to your group. So that's something to pay attention to as well. But the nice thing about this is it's a sticky situation, whereas like the Arcanist, Zenith's Empowering Disc sits on the ground. They have to run through that to get this. You can walk up, hit them with this, and it sticks to them basically. So next up is Wing. I'm pretty sure they called this Wing Buffet, but it's buffet. I'm just gonna call it buffet. That's what it is. If they wanted to call it Buffet, they should have separated that into BUFF space IT. Anyway, this is essentially not going to be used on a DPS build. This is a tanking skill for the most part. This can be used in a solo build situation, or like if you're in the night market where a lot of snares and immobilizations are being used, you could use the Fleetstep wings morph in order to get those snares off of you. However, I will say this does cost quite a bit of magicka, so that could be difficult to sustain on a stamina build or even a magicka build for that matter. That's quite a bit of magicka right there to cost. So depending on what's going on, you may or may not want to try using this. This other morph, Protect the Brood, converts into a knockback and a partial protection of your group, reducing their damage taken from projectiles. If you're in a situation where projectiles are hitting, then this could be good. I'm not sure how much situations you're going to be able to build into this. You give your group minor protection for 20 seconds, and then you gain major expedition. So something to look at there. But that's essentially the gist of that skill. It's basically a crowd control defensive utility kind of skill. Next up is Chains of Flame, and there are two morphs of this. Chains of Devastation. This is essentially a PvP morph. This converts to the enemy pull into a self pull. It no longer taunts the enemy. It deals flame damage. It basically pulls you to the target, and then it grants you major berserk for 6 seconds and major evasion for 10 seconds. So this is really really good for PvP when you're wanting to pull something close. You want to get close to somebody and then do some damage in a burst window. This is probably the morph you want to use in PvP. In PvE, Chains of Dominance. They reworked this a little bit to add the major cowardice element to, and they've mimicked what most people use the scribing chains for. I will say that the scribing chains is better because you can get resource return on every cast that gives you magicka and stamina back on every cast, whereas this only gives you a magicka restore if the target cannot be pulled. So I would recommend probably not using this unless this is just what you're wanting to use, or maybe you don't have the scribing scripts yet to do the scribing morph. But the scribing morph, in my opinion, is still superior. So the Dragonknight passives, you get an increased amount of damage that you can block. You also get an increased damage done with area and damage over time effects by 7%. So again, if you're on the blowtorch build, the area part is being buffed with that. The overtime doesn't apply to the blowtorch because the blowtorch is direct damage. It's not damage over time, but it will buff it based on the area of effect category there. Elder Dragon. This is where the minor brutality buff lives now. They moved it to Draconic power, and it's no longer on the Earthen Heart skill line. So if you're looking to buff your group with minor brutality, then you need to run the Draconic skill line on your build in order to do that. This also will increase your health recovery, which is a nice thing if for solo builds especially. And then when you cast an ultimate, they've moved this restore here. This used to be kind of somewhat part of the Earthen Heart skill line, where you got resources for every ultimate that you spent, and then it increases based on how many Dragonknight skills you have slotted. So there's the passives for Draconic power. So last skill line is Earthen Heart. This has predominantly historically been a support skill line for healers and tanks. More so tanks because Dragonknight healers are fairly rare historically. May become a thing in the future, who knows? But this does now have some damage components to it, so we're going to go over the skill line here. Magma Armor. This is a really clear-cut choice for what type of content you're doing. If you're in PvP, you likely are going to choose the Corrosive Armor because it does flame damage and it applies a buff to you that allows your direct damage attacks to ignore physical and spell resistance of your enemy while it's active. You cannot generate ultimate while this is up, so that's the problem there. That's actually a thing that they applied to both morphs. But Magma Shell basically makes yourself unkillable for the period that this is active. When it's activated, your group also gets a damage shield equal to 133% of their max health for 10 seconds. So this is a really strong support morph to run on your main tank to keep them alive in case they have a situation where maybe they're out of stamina and they really need to block a mechanic that's coming up. This right here is an emergency button or an oh shit handle. So keep that in mind. So moving on to the regular skills, we have Superheated Ward. This is essentially the spammable out of the skill line if there was one. For DPS, the best one to use is Magma Fist. I would not recommend trying to run this on a tank because this is kind of a really difficult skill to run unless you're really experienced. But what this essentially does is it puts a unique debuff on the enemy, really awesome for boss fights. This increases the enemy's damage taken by 66 for 7 seconds per stack up to 3 times. So you can get that to stack up 3 times. So it's a very unique and effective debuff because this will spread to your entire team if you're in a trial, for example. Volcanic Ward grants you a damage shield and a reduction in damage taken and it heals when it ends. So this is a PvP morph here. I would say if you're in a PvE situation, you probably in most cases want to use the Magma Fist as your this could be your stamina spammable as well. just to reiterate that. So Molten Weapons, this is your source of major brutality and sorcery in the Dragonknight toolkit. Igneous Weapons, I know I said that right this time, yay me. Uh, and Molten Armaments is the other morph. This morph here will give you a shorter duration of major brutality and sorcery, but it also gives you the empower buff. So if you're looking at running a heavy attack build, then this would be the morph you'd want to choose. Otherwise, the Igneous Weapons is more beneficial because it lasts for a whole minute rather than just the 30 seconds. Costs a little bit more, but it lasts for twice as long. So not really that much harder to sustain, especially if you're going to double the duration. So I would say in most cases, Igneous Weapons is the one you want to choose. Obsidian Shield. Fragmented Shield is essentially the healer selection. The why is that is because you get extended major mending. The major mending you get here for 4 seconds. This extends the duration of major mending by 6. So if you choose Fragmented Shield, you get major mending for 10. That's why this is the basically the morph that you want to choose for healers, because the shield scales off the higher of your maximum magicka, which is going to be fairly high on a healer, and it's capped on the target that you're sending it to uh, by their max health. So it hits nearby allies, so they have to be within 12 meters in order to get it. Um, but this would be something that you kind of want to keep up at least every 10 seconds. So a quasi spammable of sorts for a Dragonknight healer, so that you keep your major mending and shields up on your allies. So the Igneous Shield is the tank morph. You only get major mending for 4 seconds, but your damage shield is larger. So that is something to keep track of. As you can see, it's almost twice as large. Well, not quite twice, maybe 1.5. But next up is Petrify. I would say in most cases this is largely a PvP skill. Um, Fossilize immobilizes your target, applies minor breach and minor vulnerability. Much easier ways to get this. It's a single target skill. This is the problem with this one. There is a stun on the Shattering Rocks and a flame damage with a heal on this, and it does apply minor breach. However, again, this is a single target enemy focused skill here. And so I would not recommend this for PvE for the most part because of that. Uh, so last skill in Earthen Heart is the Earth Spike Mantle. This is the major resolve resource for the Dragonknight. They did a really cool rework of this in the recent rework for the Dragonknight. Earth Shield Mantle essentially is a major resolve with a damage shield tied to it. So this used to be in the Draconic Power skill line, and they moved it down to Earthen Heart to kind of mix things up a little bit and make it confusing. And so if you're on a tank, you're probably going to want to choose this morph here. Very cheap resource of major resolve with a pretty decent damage shield as well. This right here, Shatter Spike Mantle, this is going to be a really nice option for solo builds especially. This does flame damage in an AoE, and this will proc your landslide passive. We'll get to that in just a minute. But it also still gives you a damage mitigation of major resolve. So it kind of in a way mimics what the Hurricane skill does for the Sorcerer skill line, the Storm Calling, in it that it does major resolve and it does damage, and it gives you a damage increase right here. You gain increase your damage done by 100. So the other thing is this costs magicka. So if you're looking at subclassing and you're wanting a source of major resolve that does damage, but you can't handle a stamina drain, you might looking at Earthen Heart and using this instead. This might be an option for you there. Could be a unique way to build and add some flame damage AoE with the mitigation of major resolve. So just keep that in mind. But now we're going to look at the Earthen Heart passives. You get an increased true passive of what equates to just about minor resolve, 2,974. Although this is not named minor resolve, so this will stack on whatever you put on your build. This is the big one, landslide for DPS builds. Whenever you deal damage, you gain a stack of landslide. Notice this just says deal damage. This is not specific to the skill line or a specific skill or even the class. This is just dealing damage and you get the stack. So this increases your damage done by 1% per tick up to 10 times. You can get this once every 5 seconds. So in order to get that 10 times, you have to be in combat 50 seconds. That's quite a long time for this to stack up. So, and then every 2 seconds that you're not doing damage, you lose stacks. So if you have to res somebody, you're going to lose probably quite a bit. So keep that in mind. If you're running the Earthen Heart skill on a DPS, you need to keep doing damage the whole time in order for this to keep ramping up. Blessing at the peak. When you cast or deal damage with an Earthen Heart ability, in combat you generate 3 ultimate. This is an ultimate stacker here, and you also increase your critical damage by 10%. So if you're on a solo build, this is another perk here that you can implement by getting some critical damage built into your kit. And you get the ultimate every 6 seconds, by the way. So if you're trying to stack up and get to the critical damage cap, maybe you want some uniqueness to your build. Maybe you don't want to run the Adric Spear line for Templar, but you don't want to lose out on that 10% critical, or excuse me, 12% critical damage in that one. This will keep you close to that, or whatever skill line is you're using that contributes to critical damage. This now adds critical damage to your build, so that's an important call out. So you've got the landslide passive and now critical damage built into Earthen Heart. And now we have the resource regenerator passive Mountain Giant. They have reworked this. This used to be whenever you casted a skill, you got stamina back. Now what you do is you heavy attack. And this is going to apply off balance. So this is really nice support that you can add for your group. You can proc off balance. And then you will also get this amount of stamina back. And you can have this stamina regen occur every half second. So if you're on a tank build and you heavy attack, you're already going to get resources from doing that. And this just kind of adds a little bit more icing on the cake for that. So keep that in mind if you're hunting around for a tanking skill line that you want to subclass into. This right here is going to help your sustain even more so. So for pure Dragonknight classes overviews, we're going to talk about some of the pure class skill line class mastery stuff that they're going to do. As I said in the beginning, the Dragonknight is fundamentally a dot damage class, and it is focused on flame damage that procs burning and can benefit from the combustion passive, fan the flames passive, and all of that. You predominantly want to use the Deadly Aim Thermatug, although, as I said, if you're doing a Blowtorch build, then Biting Aura and Master at Arms are probably going to be what you want to switch to. So pay attention to what type of build you're using. If you're doing the Blowtorch build, you want to use these. If you're not, then these are probably the ones you want to check. So now we're going to talk about the class masteries that they're going to add to the Dragonknight. If you stay a pure blood Dragonknight, you can select up to 2 of these only. You cannot check them all. So it depends on what type of role you're fulfilling. If you're solo, a healer, a DPS, or a tank, then some of these are going to be awesome. Not all of them are great for every situation, so it depends. Uh, you've got an inexorable descent. This upgrades your landslide passive. So instead of 1% damage increase, you get 2% every time it ticks. The potency goes and your healing done. And your damage shields per stack. So the potency means the bonus applies to the base calculation, causing them to be multiplicative. So then the next one is Booming Voice. This upgrades the Storm of Voice to give you more resources when you cast your ultimate. And then this one here is one of the big ones, in my opinion, especially for if you're going to be a DPS, even in a solo environment. This right here is going to increase your damage over time that you're doing and that you apply with Searing Strike, the Dragonfire Breath, Burning Talons, and the Shatter Spike Mantle. Um, they apply a unique 12-second damage over time effect to the enemies whenever the event ends. So what this means is if you recast it early, it ends, or the enemy, uh, here it is right here, naturally ends, you recast it early, or it's cleansed. Then it puts this 12-second damage over time dot on there, and that increases, this effect stacks up to 12 times, increasing by 25% per stack up to this. So this is going to be a hammer when you're doing damage with these skills right here. So if you're using Searing Strike as your spammable, once again, here's another reason to do that. This is the Blowtorch right here, and then you have Talons and the Major Resolve skill. If you're on a Blowtorch build, this is going to trigger it. If you're using Talons and you're running the Major Resolve, and then this is your spammable, you got 3 things ticking up there. This is going to start ramping up and hitting really, really hard. So the next one is Resolute Defense. This increases the amount of damage you can block by 6% for every second you remain bracing, up to 30%. Blocking has a 20% chance to restore 500 stamina for every 1/4 of a second. Essentially, that's what that is. So this could be helpful. I haven't tested this obviously because it's not live in PlayStation yet, but um, Dragonites historically are pretty easy to sustain on, so I'm not so sure how much this part is going to be nice, but blocking the damage is always a really nice option. But just having a chance to restore, nice little sprinkle in there. Lead from the front. This right here is screaming as the best passive in the whole bunch. This is absolutely amazing for support roles. When you fire 500 ultimate, you are going to give your entire group Major Berserk and Major Protection for 33 seconds. That's absolutely huge. So you don't need to look at running the Sorcerer skill line anymore for the Atronach bonus. It only lasts for 8 or 10 seconds. This lasts for 33 if you fire it off with 500. That's a long time. You also give them Major Protection. Really easy to generate the ultimate backup when you've got the ultimate generators as well, like the Booming Voice. If you're on a support build and you're trying to get up to 500 ultimate, this is really going to help you get back up there really quick because you're going to get 10 ultimate for every 500 that you spent, or every ultimate that every 2, pardon me, you get 1 ultimate for every ultimate that you spend for 10 seconds. So this is kind of a ticking buildup. So subclassing, what each line offers. Again, Ardent Flame is a average skill line. I would say the biggest thing that's hurting it is the fact that you have to stack a lot of skill lines on there in order to benefit from using it on a DPS build. It's not to say it's not useless, or say it's not to say it's useless, but it hurts it a little bit because it's not as flexible as some of the other ones. So Draconic power still kind of limited for tanks, I feel. If you're gonna go for a blowtorch build, um, that might be appealing. Just depends. That's where you'd have to land if you're trying to do the blowtorch build. You have to use Draconic power, so that is the kind of the uniqueness to draw for this skill line. But in my opinion, the clear verdict is the Earthen Heart skill line has benefited the most from the rework. It added all those damage implements as well as keeping most of what was strong for tanking. You still have the damage shield, you still have Earthen Heart in there. Um, you even gained major resolve, and the armor passive is now living there. So it, in my opinion, it gained the best uh, movement out of the rework that they did. So that's going to end it for this lengthy video. Sorry for the length on that. But what I am going to do, I'm going to close the video out like I have been, just as a really kind of fun way to do this. I'm going to go on to my YouTube channel and we're going to play. Um, I'll just end the video with an entire play of one of my songs here that I've created with the AI programs. These are really fun for me to build. Something that I think is a really cool video. I'm just going to let this play out for the rest of the video. So if you're not into this, I just say thank you very much now for watching the video. I know it's been a really long one. If you don't know how to get to my songs really quickly, when you get to my YouTube channel, you just want to go to the playlist tab, or if you scroll a little bit here, the playlists are here. You just want to find the one that says Songs of Tamriel. I have everything listed here. If you don't want to go to my songs, if you go to the playlist, I have all kinds of folders here. Here's my companion stuff, everything that I've ever done on companions here. My beginners stuff. This is for when you're building a new character or if you're new to the game. These videos right here will help you. All of my add-on overviews, all these, there's 31 videos in this. I've done 32 set overviews that are here. Here's all my older outdated stuff if you're interested in what I said last year or whatnot. Very limited PvP stuff. I don't really dip into PvP a lot. But then I've got 17 farming videos, 9 for crafting, trials team setup stuff, DPS videos. I have 46 of those. Support, just general guides. I've got 53 videos, 32 healer videos, and then I've got 35 tank videos. So check out the playlist, see if there's anything that you're interested in. But I am going to close out the video with one of my favorite songs that I've done so far, and this is called Escape the Grave. This is about the Moongrave Fane dungeon, about Grundwolf and essentially the backstory to that. So if you're not familiar with the story, this song will tell you the story in a musical environment in a cool way. So let's play that, and I'll say thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in another video. Bye.
Swore his blade victory at man, a dragon god of old. They hunted down the dragons for glory and for gold. The Morrick struck by night, the emperor fell and died. The order broke in darkness and scattered far and wide. 600 years of silence, 600 years of shame. He drank the vampire's darkness just to stay in the game. Escape the grave. He ran from death so long, escape the grave. The cursed and the strong, no emperor is coming, no throne waits to be saved. A warrior lost forever, who could not escape the grave. Jungles of elsewhere, where moonlit temples rock, the hollow fang were waiting with everything he saw. Nasazda, the clan mother, with honeyed words and lies, she called him the devourer and lit the fire in his eyes. The stone ruins block the path, Drazaka spills blood, Nasazda pulls the strings from deep within the mud. Escape the grave. He ran from death so long, escape the grave. The cursed and the strong, no emperor is coming, no throne waits to be saved. A warrior lost forever, who could not escape the grave. Shortcuts taken to power then or now. But Grunwolf heard the thunder of dragons in the sky. 6 centuries of waiting had run his patience dry. Nasazda raised her blade and drove O'Reno back. And Grunwolf crossed the threshold, there was no turning back. Deep in moonlight's mausoleum, Ardent lay in chains. A blue dragon fell from heaven, his blood there to be drained. Mark this day, cried Grunwolf, when I bleed this dragon dry. ESO Dragonknight met his gaze and whispered, "And you cannot shoulder the sky." The blood surged like a wildfire through centuries of bone, empowered beyond all reason, but more lost and alone. For ESO Dragonknight breathed his last fire. Aaron Ron Wolf burned with him to doom souls in the darkness, the temple cold and grim. Renault knelt beside him. "I failed you, old friend. You deserved a better death than this bitter end. Escape the grave."